to the inauguration of the Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics and also to the first international seminar under its auspices on the development question in a developing economy. Can strategies of past and present give a future? Organized by IUCAE, Department of Economics, University of Kerala. Let us first welcome all the dignitaries of the inaugural session to the dais with a huge round of applause. Professor M. Professor Prabhat Patnaik, Dr. M. Veeramanikandan, Dr. A.K. Prasad, and Professor Priyam Radhamani to the dais. Professor M.A. Women have been at the helm of this department, guiding and nourishing its students and the research programs undertaken. The economics department has also a far-reaching influence in the world through its students who are spread across various institutions like the World Bank, the UN, Planning Commission, RBI, Indian Economic Service, All India Services, college professors and so on. Department of Economics has also received UGC's Special Assistance Program in recognition of its quality researches undertaken. In recognition to all the achievements of the department, last year in 2015, we were granted the financial assistance to start the Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics or IUCAE, which is being inaugurated today. Development policies and programs have to be citizen-centric and also should take into account the regional factors than going for the blind adaptation of the universal model. IUCAE aims to think out of the box and also aims to find out alternative ways to address development issues of the country. Today's international seminar, the inaugural one undertaken by the IUCAE, marks the beginning of the thought process and the direction and the discussions in this direction. Now, let us take a look at a presentation prepared about the Department of Economics and its achievements. Let us start the formal function with a prayer by Bhavya Krishna.
Sankachatvam samvagatvam samvomanamsi janadam devabhagam yadha purve samjananam upasate samaniva akuti samanam hridayam nivahat samanamastu om mano yadhavahat susahasati yadhavahat susahasati yadhavahat susahasati.
Dr. M. Veeramanikandan as the chairperson of our inaugural session. Sir, hearty welcome to the seminar and we request you to kindly start the proceedings. To deliver the welcome speech, may I invite Honorary Director of IUCAE and our faculty member, Professor A. Abdul Salim, to the dais.
Good afternoon, everybody. Honorable Professor of our university, Dr. N. Veeramanikandan, respected professors M.A. Women, Professor Prabhat Patnaik, members syndicate, Professor Radhamani, Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, Dr. A.K. Prasad, professors from other university departments, other universities, colleges, institutes, my colleagues, dear research scholars and students. This international conference marks the formal inauguration of the academic activities of the Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics, shortly called IUCAE. As we are aware, today the mainstream neoclassical ideas are prescribed as one size fit for all. But given the current socio-economic reality of the world economy, we know that the persuasion of this stream alone is not sufficient to address the problems of the economy and society. At an alternative level, the whole socio-economic and political framework is getting revolutionized, incrementally getting revolutionized on the principles of rights rather than individual rationality. Development thus envisages new economic ideas and policy regimes. This thinking, in fact, is the reason behind initiating this Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics. The center wants to promote the research and innovative studies with the objective of integrating various mainstream and alternative ideas, and thereby promoting and strengthening the research base of the world, research base of the university in particular, to meet the challenges of the fast-growing knowledge economy. The center has been undertaking various activities right from its initiation in November 2015. This is the most important event among all these. I am not going into the introduction of the theme of this conference. In fact, it has to be done by the coordinator of the conference, Siddiq. Let me come to my duty of welcoming all. We are all familiar with our Vice Chancellor, and I used to visit him regularly to discuss various activities of the center. I found him very friendly and also highly genuine to all the academic activities of the center. PVC is most popular among the academic community, particularly among the research scholars and faculty. On behalf of all of you and on my personal behalf, I extend a hearty welcome to our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. N. Veeramanikandan. Friends, we are privileged of having a renowned development economist for inaugurating the center. He has kindly consented to inaugurate the activities of the Inter-University Center and also this international conference. At present, he is Honorary Fellow Center for Development Studies, Thiruvananthapuram. After his doctorate in economics, he went to Yale University, USA for his postdoctoral research. Then he joined in the Department of Economics, Karivattam campus as lecturer. As he used to say, that time he was the irreducible minimum in the department. Later he served as professor in the University of Calicut, University of Botswana, and also in the Institute of Management in Government. He was also the chairman of the State Finance Commission and also advisor to international agencies like World Bank. A large number of articles, books and reports are to his credit. Currently, he has been working in the area of development economics. On behalf of all present and on my personal behalf, I extend a warm, hearty welcome to our dear Professor M.A. Umman. Professor Prabhat Patnaik is familiar to all of us. He has been a frequent visitor to most of the educational institutions in Kerala. Earlier, he was vice chairman of the Kerala State Planning Board. After his PhD from Oxford, he went to the Department of Politics and Economics, University of Cambridge, in the year 1969 as professor. Later, he returned to JNU to join as professor there in JNU Now he has been working as emeritus professor of the university. He was part of a four-member high-powered task force of the United Nations to recommend reform measures for the global financial system. He has also served as he is the editor of the well-known journal Social Scientist. As you know, he is a prolific writer and written a large number of articles and books. His books, Economics and Egalitarianism, Accumulation and Stability under Capitalism, The Retreat to Unfreedom, Re-envisioning Socialism, etc. are well read by the people all over the world. In this particular event, he will be delivering a keynote address on the title Globalization and the Assault on Democracy. I am happy to remind you that he is one of the external members of the Governing Council of the IUCAE. Sir, I am very happy to extend a very warm welcome to you. Dr. A.K. Prasad, our Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, and also my colleague. On behalf of all of us present here, I extend a hearty welcome to Professor A.K. Prasad. Dr. Manju S. Nair, who is the inspiration behind all the academic activities of the department, is here, and he is also one of the members of the Governing Council of this IUCAE. On behalf of everybody present here, I extend a hearty welcome to the HOD of the department. Then let me also extend hearty welcome to all the HODs present here, my colleagues, professors from other universities, colleges, institutes in and outside the country. So I will never forget the role of the technical staff of the center, Reshma Mubarak, then my research scholars, students, MPhil and PG students, the technical staff of the university, media, etc. On behalf of all of us, I extend a hearty welcome to you. Being the organizing secretary of the program, I have a special request to you all. See, the total allocation for this particular program is almost 3 lakh rupees. We expect 150 participants. Okay, now dividing this amount to 150 participants comes to 2000 rupees per head. So my humble request is to help us to effectively utilize these funds by effectively participating in the academic discussions and contributing to the sessions. That is my humble request. Thank you once again. I welcome DGP also will be appearing with already he is here. DGP TP Senkumar IPS is here. Then Kerala State Planning Board member Dr. Mridul Eapan is here, and on behalf of all present, I extend a hearty welcome to you all.
Thank you, sir. For the chairman's address, may I invite Dr. N. Veeramanikandan, Pro Vice Chancellor of Kerala University.
The dignitaries on the dais and the chief guest of the day, Professor M. A. Umman, the noted development economist, and Professor Prabhat Patnaik, the Emeritus Professor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Dr. PM Rathamani, Member Syndicate, Dr. A.K. Prasad, Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, Professor K. Abdul Salim, Laundry Director, IUCAE, Mr. Siddiq Rabiat, and other dignitaries of the days, delegates, faculty members, research scholars. and my dear students and friends. So there are two programs being inaugurated today. The first one is the inauguration of the Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics, and the second, the first international conference on the development question in a developing economy and strategies of past, present, and future. So, Professor Salim has rightly pointed out this about the center of the Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics. So this is the inaugural program of this center, and we have started on the activities of this center in 2015. And now it has materialized. The center is going to be inaugurated. As we all know that, so this center, the name of this center, Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics. So what is alternative economics, and why an alternative economics? What is the essentiality of alternative economics? When we think about the alternative thinking, so that we can see in every field or every faculty, so that rather than moving to a conventional system, some people or scholars have started thinking in a different way rather than the conventional system. When you look at it in the field of health, there you can also see a conventional, an alternative system using all the medical facilities which are there. So when we look at the agriculture, there also we can see that there is some thinking, alternative thinking and use of an alternative method of cultivation. So here, you see that this here, the Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics, that also shows that the conventions also have to think in a different way, with a different perspective, rather than following, or we cannot say that rather than following. So following the existing system and also adopting the alternative system in accordance with the diversity of the state or diversity of the nation or diversity of the community. So I think that in this context, as we know that with the people who live in India or abroad, or particularly in Kerala also, we can see that the diversity in culture, diversity in way of living, and diversity, the geographical diversity of the states. So these are some of the factors that used to be identified and addressed. I think in that context, this center has evolved. And also, so this is the first program of this center of IUCAE, that is on the development question in a developing economy. So what are the things to be explored? So that is the question. So we have to understand and identify and also research. So what is existing and what is to be studied or explored. So I think in that context, this seminar is conducted. The 3 days seminar is going to be conducted, and we have economists. So particularly Dr. Mansur is there, and also Patnaik, who is an international figure. And I hope that definitely these people will definitely address the issues and deliberate, and I hope that there will be brainstorming session. And with these words, I remain and I express my best wishes to this 3-day international seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. To introduce the theme of the seminar, may I welcome the coordinator of the conference and also the dynamic phase of our department, Mr. Siddiq Rabiat, to the stage.
A very good afternoon to all. I'm actually delighted to present the topic today, and it is after our tireless effort of 6 months, it is actually realized, and so I'm overwhelmed in fact. So my formal duty is to introduce the theme and theme of the conference and things. of course, when we initiated this discussion of the Inter-University Center, uh, uh, we had meetings, and Professor Patnaik and Dr. Veeramangandan sir was there, and we had actually first round of discussion. In that discussion, there is enough questions came what we are actually going to do in the alternative paradigm and all. So before coming to the formal introduction, I would actually greet, we are very thankful to have Dr. N. Veeramangandan, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, and Professor M.A. Woman, who has actually accepted our invitation to inaugurate and share a few words, and then Professor Patnaik and the other dignitaries, especially our DGP Senkuman is here, and our very respected Professor Ridhilipan is here. So we are very actually overwhelmed by the amount of support from different streams. Of course, let me come to my formal duty. So when we thought about the development questions, there are actually different, of course, the neoclassical stream speaks that income growth is actually the very key to achieve development of any society. So this is actually taught in the schools, universities. So changing or looking at that perspective, it is not actually real when you analyze the real world, especially if you look at the Kerala model, and it has started way back in 1970s. There people were actually pointed that it is not necessary that you have to have a higher per capita income to have development, and from that perspective there is a difference. On the contrary, you have also other visions, that is, even if you have higher per capita income, there is actually less human development across. So what is actually, it actually speaks about the heterodoxy which exists in the economy in a nutshell. So in this context, we were actually like to relook the Indian economy in large, and Kerala economy in particular, to understand how the scenario has actually overtook from the last 40 or 50 years of experience. So from that context, the entire program is actually, the entire 3 days is actually divided into 6 technical sessions and 1 panel discussion session, and of course a valedictory address. We are hoping that Professor Amin and Kannan is actually going to give wonderful lecture on that. So in that, the first technical session in fact speaks about the development experience of Kerala in particular, and whether people have any agreement today or have a disagreement, or whatever this, what all these agreements and disagreements altogether. And then in that we have actually 3 papers. Professor A.V. Jose is going to speak about the development experience of Kerala, some strategical choice and other things, which is actually what we are looking forward his presentation on that. Then we have actually 2 interesting work. One is by Dr. Sriraj, and the other one is Subin. And Subin is actually looking the development paradigm from a people's perspective and people's lens, and Sriraj is actually arguing that there is a radical departure, whether there is a radical departure from the growth stories in Kerala in particular. Then to connect this understanding of Kerala experience, we are actually arranged the session into a larger context, especially the Indian context, where we are actually looking the development and what are the elements which is basically missed out. In that particularly, we are giving a priority to women's, of course, gender issues. So in that, Professor Padmini Swaminathan is going to speak about the gender injustice, especially in the India's sectoral concern, especially in the light of various sectors. Then Dr. Anudha is going to speak about community reservations and what are the roles which community reservation is going to do, and then Christabel is going to speak about the comments and the declining livelihood in Kerala, special reference to Kerala. So and the final paper, Sri Lekha Nair is going to talk about the gender, the taxation and its actually anomalies when it comes to gender issues. And then we had actually the third session, which is largely connected with the development, which is a sector-specific concerns. And in that we have a service sector, and Professor Omkar Nath has actually agreed to basically speak on the deproletarization of agrarian questions, which is actually, I don't know whether, because his health is actually not very good, and the doctor insisted that he cannot actually travel, and we are still yet to confirm that whether he's going to come or not. But otherwise, the other sectors, including the manufacturing sector, then we have issues on service sector and other sectors, especially the agriculture service and the manufacturing sector will be discussed in the third session. And then we have an array of different sort of understanding on alternative development paradigm, which is the young researchers who is going to present, which is, I think, more illuminating, and we may get new insights on the development issues. Then the fourth session is, the fifth session is going to talk about the political economy dynamics of development, where Professor Vinod Abraham is going to speak about the declining share in the manufacturing, declining share in the wages in the manufacturing sector, and Santosh Verma is actually speaking about the changing paradigms and the land holding, etc. In India, especially with the health fairness association. This is, I think, very interesting paper as far as what I read from the paper. And Dr. Nagarajan Naidu is going to speak about the political economy of the public debt in India. So in that session also we had some interesting perspective on the alternative view on how we can look at all these issues. And then the final technical session is on the inclusiveness of the development strategies, where different the sectors are actually looked at, education's alternative views on education. Then we have actually on environment and how the institutional role of judiciary into the development process we can actually look at. So all this would be actually discussed in the final technical session. Then we may be having a very illuminating panel discussion where Professor Venkatesh Atreya, A.V. Jose, and Ram Kumar and Harila will be actually speaking about. And these are the things which is actually, in a nutshell, you can understand in the coming 3 days. And I hope all the very best to enjoy all of you and be an active participant in this venture. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is the inaugural address by the internationally renowned development economist and the founding gurus of our department, Professor M.A. Umman. It is our pleasure and honor to invite Professor M.A. Umman for the address.
Esteemed Vice Chancellor, respected Prabhat Patnaik, my colleagues on the dais, and friends. I think a small dimension of this project of alternative economics and spend a few minutes on that. I've actually written out something, because there are a lot of quotations. I cannot give an offhand presentation. Title of my talk today is The Discipline of Economics. I don't like to call it economic science. The discipline of economics and the quest for alternate. I don't think I am eminently qualified to inaugurate the Inter-University Center for Alternative Economics, which I think is a sui generis project. I don't think also alternative inquiries are very much encouraged in Indian academic tradition. However, scientific progress can happen only through questioning. As far back as 1981, I wrote a piece titled Hidden Curricula in Social Sciences, an introductory note based on the economic courses in Indian universities in New Frontiers in Education, where I tried to demonstrate that neoclassical economics dominated the economic syllabi of Indian universities and that Marxian economics was treated as poison and propaganda. Actually, I wrote the paper in '76 and sent it to John Robinson, Dudley Sears and Kane Trice, who gave very encouraging comments. I have also questioned the rationality of keeping economic history, economic thought and several other subjects out of bounds. Although this is not the place to narrate the economic syllabus revision that I initiated at the Calicut University during the latter part of the 70s and early 80s, that I succeeded in introducing political economy of capitalism as a compulsory subject for MA courses in economics, along with the ubiquitous micro-macro duo, is something that I would like to mention here. I strongly believe that students have to be told that there are other meat in the kitchen. During the early 1990s, when Government of India launched the Economic Reform Drive, I wrote a piece entitled Economics, Economy and a Market-Friendly Paradigm, which highlighted the need for rethinking the content, tools and goals of the discipline of economics. When I turned 80, I wrote a paper. Excuse me for being first person singular. I wrote a paper which later appeared in Social Change under the title Meaning of Development, Reflections of an Octogenarian Teacher of Economics. The paper shows the need for rethinking various concepts in economics. This talk is only an elaboration of what I have said in the past. In the first part, the need for rethinking the conceptual foundations and tools of economics is attempted. In the second part, I briefly examine how well development economics, a subdivision of economics, has served the profession and the people. In the third section, I introduced Thomas Piketty's Capital in the 21st Century as a relevant complement to my arguments. Economics, where the shoe pinches. People pursue any scientific study, as Karl Popper puts it. I think you must all try to read Karl Popper to learn something about the riddle of the world in which we live and the riddle of man's knowledge of that world. In quote. Economics cannot be an exception. On this ground, the conduct of the discipline of economics leaves many things to be desired. The scientific pursuit of economics obtains its relevance and rationale because of the economic problem of provision and allocation. Although the allocation problem is as old as people living in social groups, its complexities and character change with the emergence of capitalism. Modern economics, as it evolved in the 18th century, tried to explain the wealth-getting and wealth-using activities of human beings following the Industrial Revolution. Adam Smith's monumental work of 1776 was an inquiry into the nature and causes of wealth of nations. Through the interplay of basic forces of self-interest of individuals, categorized as buyers and sellers, working through the invisible hand of market, humans generate economic activities and probably social order. In the well-known words of Smith, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. Unquote. Self-interest rationality, mentioned by the welcome speaker, has come to be accepted as the basic economic behavior of human beings by the discipline. That economists like Arrow, Debreu, and several others who brought mathematics closer to economics and won Nobel laurels start their analysis from the self-interest rationality underlying economic behavior. At this point, it is instructive to mention that economists like Mill and Ricardo sought to explain the principles of political economy based on the economic problems of their times. But in the latter part of the 19th century, political economy became economics, probably after the publication of Alfred Marshall's Principles of Economics in 1890. Economics has now come to be accepted as a professional decision science that seeks optimal solution to allocation problems. Lionel Robbins' Nature and Significance of Economic Science, published in 1932, could be considered a good summary of the way economics has been viewed by the profession, notably the Austrian School of Economics during the early part of the 20th century. I think it is not wide of the mark to critique afresh a Robbinsian definition familiar to all of you, which consider economics as the science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternate uses. This is the essence of the neoclassical economics which made economy external to society, and they rationalized this transformation. First, Robbins' approach affirms the existence of an ahistorical, asocial, and universally valid deductive reasoning that was the want in academic thinking on economics long before Robbins wrote his essay. Projecting economics as a pure science, Robbins does not want his discipline to be, quote, a happy hunting ground of charlatans and knaves, unquote, and takes it out of its social and cultural context. Leon Walras had perfected his general equilibrium theory. Jevons produced his mathematical theory of political economy and utility, and several others joined them in the conceptualization of marginalism and utilitarianism. All of them are conspicuously dressed up in mathematical garbs. The title of the very first chapter of Debreu's Theory of Value, an axiomatic analysis of economic equilibrium, for which he got his Nobel Prize, is mathematics. My simple question is, can botany or zoology or physics, or for that matter any science, start its first chapter like this and earn a Nobel Prize in the field? The basic affirmation in all works like this is that in a competitive economy composed of rational agents, economic activities are related to one another through a system of prices. They forget that the consequences of reducing social life into price calculus are far-reaching. As Carl Polanyi observes, to allow the market mechanism to be sole director of the fate of human beings and their natural environment, indeed, even of the amount and use of purchasing power, would result in the demolition of society. Unquote. By creating an economy virtually dissociated from society, it became logical to exclude social cost, depletion of natural resources and properties of future generation from accountancy and balance sheets of business corporations. Along with the modern principle of commerce and accounting, there emerged the acceptance of labor as a commodity in the market, governed by the application of the principle of the freedom of contract. In practice, again I quote Polanyi, this meant that the non-contractual organizations of kinship, neighborhood, profession and creed were to be liquidated, since they claimed the allegiance of the individuals and thus restrained his freedom. Unquote. Robbins' argument that the theory of value, which is based on exchange of commodities, is universally relevant and applicable equally well in Robinson Crusoe economy as well as in a communist society, is also questionable. On this, the principles of this Gregory Mankiew's Principles of Economics, you might have read his 10 principles where he elaborates Robinson Crusoe economy with other economies. He is abstracting from relationships of all types. He forgets, like all others in the marginalist tradition, like the great textbook writers in economics, follow their footsteps. The societies differ in their valuation of goods and resource allocation, as in the case of a tribal economy, village economy and so on. For example, when a tribal chief in Africa divides the kill of the day by giving the largest share to the female head of the family with the largest number of children in the community, he is virtually following the principle from each according to their abilities and to each according to their needs. Certainly, resource allocation need not always be via price mechanism and can have alternative ways of allocation. Second, I would like to interrogate the assumption of unlimited wants, on which the so-called scarcity definition of economics, scarcity is inevitable given the assumption of unlimited wants. And much of neoclassical edifice is grounded. The mantra of growth, be it production of military hardware or services, truck trafficking, arms trade or whatever, as the motor force of progress is derived and legitimized on the basis of this assumption. While wants are unlimited, basic needs are not. Conceptual categories to ensure fair allocation of basic needs got out of the scope of mainstream economics. Given scarcity of resources, economics became a science of choice between alternative ends. By valuing means above ends, the freedom of human beings to choose the ends they favor is undermined. The development of means, as it were, dictates the choice of ends. Schumacher, I am quoting from Schumacher. Amartya Sen's development as freedom and the evaluation of social progress by Stiglitz, Sen and Pitausi to be mentioned as important contributions aimed at solving the confusion between ends and means. Third, the assertion of Robbins that economics is neutral between ends, strictly speaking, rules out a wide and relevant range of development economic analysis, which should arguably deal the Socratic question, how should one live? This is a normative question that cannot be wished away and has to be reckoned with in evaluating individual and collective well-being. Several economists, Amartya Sen have endeavored to bring economics closer to ethics and justice, because such a high test is not only an epistemological incongruity but also a developmental tragedy. Sen actually rescued welfare economics from its narrow orientation and gave social choice theory a more logical and ethical dimension. If you accept the old welfare economics criteria as self-interest maximization, You embrace anti-ethicalism and you live in the narrow Pareto world. Wilfredo Pareto and all others of the mainstream persuasion argued for efficiency-based resource allocation, which again is based on self-interest maximization. Pareto world is a social state which, as you know, which is optimal if and only if no one's welfare can be raised without reducing the welfare of someone else. As Sen rightly points out, a state can be Pareto optimal, with some people in extreme misery and others rolling in luxury, so long as the miserable cannot be made better off without cutting into the opulence of the rich. You cannot disturb Nero when he is fiddling, even while Rome is burning. What a strange economics. After this brief critique, I think it is important to understand that the neoclassical paradigm in the sense in which Thomas Kuhn elaborates, occupies the center place in the textbooks, notably that by Paul Samuelson. You know, all of you are familiar with Paul Samuelson, and in his 4th edition, I don't know whether he has repeated it, that was what I read at that time. He said, economic principles that display some of the logical beauty of Euclid's geometry is his preference. And textbook, Samuelson and William Nordhaus. The latest edition is 19th edition. George Mankey, whom I referred, and several others belonging to eminent universities. Interestingly, most of the fundamental principles are presented in non-falsifiable terms. But as Popper argues, all scientific propositions must be falsifiable. In 1980, when I visited some universities in the Soviet Union as part of the University Grants Commission exchange program, I was told that Paul Samuelson's economics is a compulsory reading for economic graduates in most universities. This was under Brezhnev regime. In 2000, when I visited China to participate in a conference on globalization organized by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I raised a question to the professor of economics at the Beijing University whether Marxism was taught in economics courses at the University of Beijing. The reply was in the negative. But I am told that Samuelson's textbook is a prescribed reading for graduate courses in China. Not only in the academic world, neoclassical paradigm is equally strong in shaping government policies as well as that of the International Lending Agency. The theoretical underpinning of the policy prescriptions and policy choices made by the IMF, World Bank and US Treasury, or what has been called as the Washington Consensus, are rooted in neoclassical economic paradigm. The theoretical postulates governing the so-called structural adjustment policies employed to manage and manipulate the loan receiving countries of Asia, Africa and Latin America, which virtually ruined many of them, as most of you know, but derived from neoclassical economics. It will be interesting to quote Kaushik Basu, the Vice President of the World Bank and formerly India's economic advisor. Quote, the free market proposition is a powerful intellectual achievement and one of the great aesthetic appeals, but its rampant misuse has had huge implications for the world, in particular in the way we craft policy, think about globalization and dismiss dissent. Unquote. I don't know whether Basu is an exception. Not only that, it has helped to legitimize poverty, inequality, crime, colonization and conquest. Now let me raise two questions. One, can the discipline of economics keep out of its normal inquiry the quest to organize a social order that ensures basic needs for all citizens? Two, as not economics, through a self-imposed restriction, limited the great possibilities of building development theories and policies relevant to human well-being. It is this question that I take up in the next section. Although development is a comprehensive concept, disciplinary specialization and division of labor is needed to facilitate a deeper understanding of social reality and human flourishing in its various dimensions. Development economics is one branch of economics that has avowedly grown out of a concern to prescribe some way out of the problem of backwardness and underdevelopment of the post-war colonial world. Its popularity was so high that innumerable development study centers sprang up in all parts of the world, including India and in Toronto. The MIT and Harvard, which are widely hailed as the intellectual capital of the world, plunged straight into generating theories, tools and techniques to develop the less developed part of the planet. Have they succeeded? What were the most prominent alternative development thought that emerged? Although 72 professors have been awarded Nobel Prize in Economics since its inception in 1969, it is somewhat puzzling to note that most of them avoided development issues and treaded the path of mathematical formalism as the most suitable technique of reasoning in matters of economics. The Aradomar model, Solow model and several others, including the Mahalanobis model in India, enjoyed considerable intellectual appeal and found a respectable niche in the academic departments of economics in the various universities and colleges around the world. The Solow model, for which Solow got Nobel Prize in 1987. All the persons I mentioned, most of the persons I mentioned got Nobel Prize. In extension, it is interesting to quote Solow. Everything above is the neoclassical side of the coin. Most especially it is full employment economics in the dual aspect of equilibrium conditions and frictionless competitive causal system. Unquote. There are even such extreme cases as that of Ronald Coase, winner of 1991 Nobel Prize, who argued for rational development. All what is needed is to provide individuals in the economy with information about the consequences of different policies, and the rational parties will make use of that information to arrive at an efficient solution. One can mention several such models, but most of them fail to address development issues directly. I can firmly say that most of the development economic theories were abstractions from structural inequalities and social injustice. To be sure, the spirit of Lionel Robbins continues to rule the road. While there are exceptions, for example, the structuralists in Latin America are all rubbish. Situation up to 1970 is summed up by Amartya Sen. Quote, much of modern growth theory is concerned with rather esoteric issues. Its link with public policy is often very remote. It is as if a poor man collected money for his food and blew it all on alcohol. Unquote. Here Sen is referring to the professional tragedy of the discipline. More than a decade later, while still holding that development economics has no central role to play in the conquest of underdevelopment and backwardness, for this he said before he wrote Development History. Sen thought at the time to bury traditional development economics has not yet arrived. Surely, development economics failed the profession and the people of the less developed world. Growing inequality and social injustice have continued ad infinitum. I have now quoting Professor Galbraith, several other people, I skip it. 15 years later, in Paul Krugman, lamentably, a constant returns perfect competition view of reality, took over the development literature and eventually via the World Bank and other institutions, much of real world development policy as well. Unquote. As I have mentioned in section 1, that the World Bank and IMF, through their large projects and prolific publications, have influenced the development thinking of the world during the last half a century, is an indisputable fact of contemporary epistemology. To quote the World Development Report 1991, competitive markets are the best way, as it found, for efficiently organizing the production and distribution of goods and services. A consensus is gradually forming in favor of a market-friendly approach to development. Unquote. Although a careful reading of the WDR's World Development Reports shows that it is slowly moving away from its single-minded pursuit for market growth, there is a clear focus towards making the poor responsible for their development through a process of empowerment. I have written on this recently in the EPW. Despite all these realities, Debraj Ray is familiar to at least some of the students of economics, I am sure, of New York University, an acknowledged textbook author on development economics, concludes his paper on development economics thus: development economics is alive and well. The paper, admittedly meant to review the contribution of development economics, covers a wide range of subjects, evidently fails to engage with several significant problems of development. There is no sense of proportion in identifying and analyzing vital development problematic, while devoting considerable space for non-issues, for example, convergence versus non-convergence. No discussion is entertained on several important normative issues like who gets what, the problem of missing women, women empowerment, gender justice, greenhouse gas and climate change, and so on and so forth. Amartya Sen gets only a passing mention in the text. The various issues raised in the Human Development Report, whose avowed purpose has been to take policy focus away from national income to human development, are also left out in the textbook. The author follows the mainstream tradition of leaving out the writing of such scholars as Karl Marx, Karl Polanyi, and several left thinkers, and opts for a new neoclassical framework. It may be of interest to hear the learned scholar. While I have tried, I am quoting Debraj Ray. While I have tried to provide a conceptual overview in this essay, recent research in development economics has been almost entirely empirical. A veritable explosion in computing power, the expansion of institutional data sets and their increased availability in electronic form, and the growing ease of collecting one's own data has bred a new generation of development economists. Somebody referred me as a development economist. I am not a development economist and I don't belong to this category. Their empirical sensibilities, I am quoting, continuing the quotation. Their empirical sensibilities are of a high order. They are extremely sensitive to issues of endogeneity, omitted variables, measurement error, and biases induced by selection. They are constantly on the search for good instruments for natural experiments, and when these are hard to find, they are adept at creating experiments of their own. Unquote. While the paper speaks of the type of social and economic issues covered by the new generation of development economies, whose empirical sensibilities are of a high order, he has failed to substantiate what he said. To be sure, development economics has failed to address several fundamental social choices issues like more butter or more gun, prevention of abject poverty in the midst of plenty, etc. Equally important is its failure to mark as fundamental the growing inequality in most countries of the world and the continued existence of unprecedented opulence along with hunger, malnutrition, avoidable illness and death, lack of social care and so on. Is it not a matter of concern for the academic community and policy makers of the world that nearly 2 billion people cannot live and flourish as dignified social beings despite our half a century of development thinking and action in this world? We have already referred to Simon Kuznets, who got Nobel Prize in 1971, much earlier, who considered inequality a natural accompaniment of development to be wiped out in due course. Another textbook hero, Arthur Lewis, Nobel laureate in 1979, argued that inequality facilitates development. I have no doubt that but for the recent Occupy Wall Street movement, the academic community, the media and the world at large would not have even known that 1% of the people manipulated the American state apparatus and economy to their advantage, and that even the middle class, and not to speak of the poor, were marginalized, and that 20% of the population commanded 80% of the disposable income of the American economy. Several other despicable truths. Economics and the challenge posed by Thomas Piketty. Before I conclude, I wish to introduce Thomas Piketty, a young French economist, because I think he is very relevant in the context of this talk for a variety of reasons. First, a PhD in economics based on mathematical theorems from MIT at the age of 22, and they afford him professor's post. Piketty has now questioned the excess use of mathematical tools. This, I thought, is something to write home about. To be sure, economics is not mathematics. This I wrote several years. Let me quote Piketty somewhat extensively. Please listen for my sake. To put it bluntly, the discipline of economics has yet to get over its childish passion for mathematics and for purely theoretical and often highly ideological speculation at the expense of historical research and collaboration with other social sciences. Economists are all too often preoccupied with petty mathematical problems of interest only to themselves. This obsession with mathematics is an easy way of acquiring the appearance of scientificity without having to answer the far more complex questions posed by the world we live in. There is one great advantage to being an academic economist in France, he is in France now. Here, economists are not highly respected in the academic and intellectual world or by political and financial elites. Hence, they must set aside their contempt for other disciplines and their absurd claim to greater scientific legitimacy, despite the fact that they know almost nothing about anything. Sorry for saying, I am quoting Piketty, I am not saying. Second, several economists like Robert Solow get a 11-page review of Piketty, praising Piketty like who evidently got Nobel Prize in Economics for their mathematical prowess, have raised Piketty for the quality of his work. The historical evidence that he produced is falsifiable inference, and above all his accent on relevance rather than elegance should make many a Nobel pundits sit back and reflect. Third, Piketty acquired world fame for producing historical evidence for 300 years in 20 countries to show that private capital accumulation inevitably leads to the concentration of wealth in fewer and fewer hands, a prophecy which Marx made in the 19th century, more in an apocalyptic fashion rather than in solid data. I am sure many of you are aware that professors of economics in the past derived comfort in the Kuznets' bell-shaped curve and naively hoped and probably prayed for a less unequal world to unfold. Piketty's work has upset the apple cart of mainstream economics. He has endeavored to prove that balancing forces of growth, competition, and technological progress in the past have not succeeded in reducing inequalities and promoted social harmony. The world has there before it incontrovertible evidence of widening inequality. I have lot of references there. To be sure, growing inequalities are threatening the existence of democratic societies and democratic values. 4. I fully endorse Piketty who sees, quote, economics as a sub-discipline of the social science alongside history, sociology, anthropology, and political science, and prefers the term political economy as it conveys the only attribute that sets economics apart from other social sciences, namely its political, normative, and moral purpose. To conclude, economics is not neutral between ends, and research to understand social reality has to be done on a multidisciplinary canvas. It is high time economists venture to rethink the content, goals, and rules of the discipline. To begin with, will young economists of Kerala examine their syllabus, or are they going to fall in line with the many who resist change? I am addressing the professors also. I throw this challenge before you. Let me quote the powerful words of John Robinson 70 years ago. Academic quote, academic teaching for the last 100 years, that is the time of John Robinson, has been concerned with propagating the ideology of laissez-faire and the free play of the market force. It has done to distract attention from the actual operation of the capitalist economy than to illuminate it. Yet, it does not consist merely of slogans. It is an intellectual structure which has fascinated generations of students and provided generations of professors with position and with reputation for the brilliance with which they expound and elaborate it. Unquote. What a prophetic voice. Piketty in a way repeats in unmistakable terms what this Cambridge University professor, John Robinson, said over 7 decades ago. Will people pay heed and ponder over this for concrete action? This is for the center to act and work towards a more relevant syllabus for the economic students of Indian universities, if not for Kerala. Various sins of omissions and commissions on the part of social science and economic professional community compel me to pose the following question along with Paulo Freire. What is the ontological vocation of human beings, especially that of the intellectual? I strongly believe it is to transform the world handed down to them. In this task, I remain, we have not succeeded. Thank you very much.